You're listening to The Artist Athlete, episode 61. This podcast is dedicated to Circus. It's a place for professionals in the industry to share their stories, viewpoints, and information, and a place for outsiders to get a sneak peek into this world. Hey, friends, fans, and enemies. I'm Shannon McKenna. I'm the host of the Artist Athlete podcast, a circus artist in my own right, and the founder of theartistathlete.com. As always, now, forever, has been, ever shall be, I wouldn't say ever shall be. If someone offered me a lot of money, I would probably let them buy this podcast from me, to be perfectly honest. But for now, this podcast is sponsored entirely by Patreons. So that is people who are listening every week, just like you, or binge listening, just like you. And they give small amounts of money every month. And in exchange, I send them stickers. I give them discounts on other cool artist athlete swag. We're having t-shirts that are coming out very soon. And if you pledge at the enemy level, which is $30 a month or more, I will call you up and we'll have a little chat for 30 minutes. And at the end of that chat, we make a recording that we'll play at the end of every episode for as long as you're a Patreon of mine. And we have a couple of new enemies this month. So the first one is Andy Smith. He's from Jacksonville, Florida. I called him up. We chatted for like 30 minutes. It was awesome. He's super cool. And then I realized that I had forgot to hit record on the whole conversation. So Andy was gracious enough to hop back on the phone with me real quick, make the recording for his end of episode playback, and just to be like, hey, Andy, you're super awesome. In addition to playing it at the end of the episode, I want to play it right now for you guys. So let's hear from Andy.
Hey there, artists and athletes. This is Andy Smith, owner and artistic director at Saltaire Circus School in Jacksonville Beach, Florida. And I want to thank you for contributing to the Artist Athlete podcast. If you ever find yourself down in Florida, come check us out. Whether you're an artist, athlete, or someone ordinary just looking to be extraordinary, we got a place for you.
Thanks again, Andy, for contributing. And to everyone down at Saltaire Circus Studio in Jacksonville, Florida. A little bit of what Andy and I talked about was how hard it is to be a studio owner in the US, how much it's a passion project, how much work it takes, how little return you get for it in those first few years. So hats off to Andy and anyone else out there who is running a studio, especially in the United States, with insurance the way it is and liability laws. You guys are freaking awesome. Not that people in other parts of the world that aren't also running studios aren't also awesome, because y'all are as well. If you want to be even more awesome than you already are, please, patreon.com/theartistathlete is the website. You can give as little as $1 a month, and every single one goes into helping the podcast so that you can hear more interviews like the one you're going to hear today. My guest today is Lewie West. Lewie is an Australian-born, self-described generalist specialist. That is to say, he tumbles, he does aerial, and all sorts of other insane acrobatics and movement. He began at the National Institute of Circus Arts in Melbourne, Australia, and his influences are breakdancing and traditional gymnastics. He then went on to work with the company Circa and is currently in Berlin performing at the Chameleon with the company Gravity and Other Myths. Here's my interview with Lewie West.
I feel like the first 10 minutes of any Skype meeting is always just, can you hear me? What about now? Is it clear?
Yeah. No, wait, hold on. I think there's a delay. No.
Yeah.
Okay. You're good. Yeah.
Yeah.
All that. But at least it's not video, so you can't see my messy hair right now, which is good.
Yeah, well, I'm basically in my pajamas and I've just done a show, so, you know.
Yeah, are you at the Chameleon right now? It says you're in Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah. We're like 2/3 of the way through our season.
Nice. With Circa?
With GOM.
Oh, right.
Gravity and Other Myths. Yeah.
Okay. Whenever I think about Gravity and Other Myths, I just think about, what is it, Backbone?
Yeah.
I forget that there's any other like shows that they have.
Yeah, well, there's 3 touring at the moment, and there's one that's retired. So this is the newest one.
Okay, cool. How's it going?
Yeah, it is as awesome as everyone said it was going to be, which is really nice.
Yeah, Berlin's a great city.
Yeah, I'm just so enjoying not traveling. That's the best thing.
Nice. Cool. Well, do you have this is the part where like I want to start to ask you more questions about that, but then I'm like, oh, we should probably like do that on the podcast.
Yeah. Chuck on the recording device and let's just talk about whatever.
Sounds great. So Lewie West, welcome to the Artist Athlete podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Good job. Yeah, killing it already.
Classic response,
yeah,
I reckon.
Just like a thanks for having me, you know, super humble, appreciative, but also like acknowledging that you're you.
It's hard to go wrong with that one, I think.
No, for sure. It's like, it was great. You're killing it already. What do you do? Who are you?
I am an acrobat, and I would call myself a generalist, or maybe even a generalist specialist. So I like doing a whole bunch of different things with my body, mostly in the realm of circus.
Wait, what do you mean you're a generalist specialist?
Well, I feel like I have skills in a bunch of different disciplines that have gone to a level that is fairly high rather than branching out totally wide. So it's kind of like I like doing a little bit of everything, but I also like getting it to a decent level.
What do you attribute your ability to be a generalist to?
I think I just like doing different stuff, and I get bored if I do the same thing too often.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was not planned.
Do you have a tumbling background, or do you have something like, do you think that there's something in your background that aids in that ability? Because I get bored doing a lot of things too, but like if I don't really hunker down and like work on something a lot, it's not going to be at a level where anybody's going to want to watch it on stage.
I think I don't know. I tend to get obsessed about one thing and then I will do that thing quite a lot. And then I will find something else to obsess about, and then I'll start doing that thing. But I'll consistently kind of go back and touch up on all the other things, so that, you know, over the period of however long I've been doing this, which is, you know, 20 years or so, that kind of adds up to a lot of stuff. Yeah. So just being interested in different forms of manipulation and acrobatics, and then, you know, the more you learn, the easier the next thing is to learn because you've got more to refer it to. And
yeah, I did Google you before this conversation, and I found one podcast or something you had done talking about this whole idea of lateral versus vertical movement.
Yeah, that's probably like the only other interview like this I've done. So
nice. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I found it a really interesting concept or idea.
The idea is basically, in my head, there are kind of 2 ways to develop skill. And the first one is what we probably all think of when we think of developing a skill, which is vertical. I think of it as vertical, which is harder and harder tricks. So I can do a forward roll. I want to learn a head spring, handspring. I want to learn a front salt. I want to learn twisting. I want to learn a double front. That's kind of like, there's always the next big trick that you're aiming to get in your pocket. And then horizontal skill development is kind of, say you've got to the level of forward roll, cartwheel, handspring, backflip. Instead of going for those next bigger, more spectacular, more dangerous tricks, you will start exploring along that kind of realm of, you know, just that space. With those skills you already have, it's not going to be to get more muscles and more flexible. It's going to be more like creative, exploring what learning those other skills, what has that taught you as a byproduct kind of thing, and exploring that.
So what would be the benefit of that?
I find it generally more interesting because I think when I was younger, and I think this is a stage most people go through, when you see a very hard trick, it's amazing. You see your first double back salt and you're like, wow, that's incredible. And then you see your 100th one, and it's kind of got diminishing returns every time. But if you can show someone something that they've never seen before, even if it's not particularly the highest skill level, I know when I see something I haven't seen before, that is immediately more interesting than seeing another double back salt.
Do you think you have to get to the point where you can do the double back salt to appreciate that?
Not necessarily. I definitely think that to properly explore horizontally, you definitely need a base level of skill. You know, you've got to learn the rules before you can break the rules generally. So I think it definitely helps. The higher your vertical skill level, obviously, the more options and opportunities and different things you can play with, as long as your brain works that way. But I know people who can do incredibly hard tumbling passes, but you get them to do some cartwheel variation, which is not very technically difficult. It's just different, and they cannot do it because that's just not what they've trained. They've not trained control in that way, which is something that I really like.
Did you always train like your tumbling in the frame of circus, or were you a gymnast as a kid?
Yeah, I bounced around a bit. So I started with gymnastics and trampolining, which was a lot more linear, normal form kind of thing. But I also started breakdancing, and that kind of was a real eye-opener because when I started breakdancing, I didn't know how to dance and everything was very stiff and I barely bent my elbows and I didn't have very good rhythm or anything. And then gradually as I learned to relax, and in breakdancing, novelty is a huge part of what makes things exciting and what people get really hyped about. So there's that mix of, you know, new and difficult. And if you can do something new and difficult, then that's where it's at.
What inspired you to get into breakdancing?
I think really it was, yeah, no, but it was really just my older brother started doing it. One of my older brothers, and he was the one I kind of looked up to and followed the most. And so I was like, oh, well, if he's doing that as a younger brother, I'm just going to start doing it in a really annoying way. Well, not in an annoying way. He found it slightly annoying that I was trying to do the thing that he was suddenly interested in.
Yeah.
I just tagged along. Eventually, that actually became a really great bonding thing for us.
So you have the movement style of a gymnast, and then you've got this like breakdancing. Did you find it easy to merge the two, or was there some kind of learning curve to that?
I mean, I think the first, and this is something that I don't have a good name for what I do particularly. Like people will say dance acrobatics or creative tumbling or that kind of thing. And I still don't know what to call it really because I don't like any of the names I've heard. But the first creative tumbling pass that I ever did, probably it took about 3 or 4 years going from the first link sequence to the final, 10 tricks in a row. And then, everyone after that got progressively easier to create as you realize that you don't have to stick to those boundaries that no one has necessarily said, this is how you tumble, but they're kind of understood as that's what happens.
So wait, so you're saying it took 3 to 4 years to make a tumbling pass that, what was the metric at the end of it that you were like, all right, I've made it?
I think someone saw it and said, hey, that looks cool.
Nice.
That was, which is a pretty good metric.
Clapped for it. Yeah, cool.
Yeah. And it wasn't, 4 years of hard work. It was like once a month I would add a new trick or I'd revisit it every after a break and then add something new or try something different. Sure. It wasn't a concerted effort to make that one tumbling pass.
Sure. Ed, do you think because I do know what you're talking about. It's a really cool movement, actually, I think that's happening in, I don't know if it's in dance or if it's in circus or what's going on, but I am noticing, I'm not a tumbler myself, but that there's this kind of element of like tricking and breakdancing that's merging into acrobatics now. That you seem to be one of
the it's so cool. I love watching it.
Do you have like a methodology for building those passes now? Those kinds of tumbling passes? Like, is there, I don't want to ask if there's a formula because I feel like the answer is no. Maybe it's yes. Is there a formula for building these tumbling passes?
Not really. Nothing strict. No. But my way of doing it is basically just when you learn a new skill, just explore it. Explore different ways into it and out of it and see what feels good and see what the momentum tells you. Oh, this one feels like it wants to go more in a circle or this one seems to link in this way. And the more you do it, the better a sense you get of kind of what will look and feel good. And also you have more skills in your pocket. Mm-hmm. So again, it's just like the more you do it, the more the more options you have.
And how adept do you find you are at choreographing this on other people?
Medium level of adeptness, probably. I've done it a little bit with friends mostly, and I've taught a few things and choreographed a few small things. It's definitely a new world that I haven't played in that much, but I can generally say like, oh, try this, or I think that would look cool. And sometimes it works on their bodies and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. Do you think you can teach like the concepts behind it? I guess. How the hell am I asking?
I'm sure you can.
Do you know what I'm getting at?
What I've found is that people, I know what you're getting at. What I've found is people seem to have an innate sense of it or they don't. Like I've definitely found people who see what I do and then kind of copy the moves mostly, and then they don't really get much further than that. And then there are other people who absolutely you can barely tell they've been inspired by what I've done at all. And I, in fact, probably wouldn't even know if they hadn't told me. That's what I think is much more fulfilling for them, is that they've taken the concepts or they've taken the ideas or they've been inspired and then they've worked out how it works on their body and what they enjoy doing.
Do you change what you're doing based on your surroundings? Like, do you adjust for a hard floor versus a soft floor? How much of your environment do you take into consideration when you're creating these movements?
Yeah, lots. I think every different surface is an opportunity to play with a different movement style. And that's kind of been my philosophy with all of Circus, is I feel like an opportunist. It's like, oh, I'm around someone who's good at this. I should learn that from them. Or I'm on a floor that works really well with sliding moves, so I should probably just work on sliding moves for the next hour. Like, it's kind of, I find that a much more fun and relaxed way to go about learning, is just you do what's available, because who knows when you'll get another chance to learn from that person or use that floor, and you never know when it will come in handy down the track.
And so you never feel pressure to like learn the big trick or...
Well, I mean, I definitely did. I think that's one of the things I've really enjoyed getting older and having less of a circus ego and knowing that my body just can't do some of it anymore as I get older. I'm almost 32. And so yeah, it's like, that I think when you're young, you should absolutely go for the big tricks, because that's fun. And it's something really satisfying about seeing how far you can push yourself and seeing how far you can go and how strong you can get. And all that stuff is really exciting and really valuable to learn. But then, yeah, as I found as I get older, my values change and my way I go about it changes and why I do it changes. So I just go with that now, because I enjoy it mostly and because it's what I'm good at. Yeah. And so that's definitely something I think about now, is like I never want to get trapped in this thing, but there's a whole lot of training and years that have gone into all this stuff I know now. So it'd be a bit of a shame to not do it anymore, particularly when I still enjoy it.
So you mentioned earlier you're in Berlin now, you're from Australia, and you're working with an Australian company at the Chameleon. I'm just, for the listeners at home, in case you couldn't tell, Louie's accent is Australian. And you mentioned you're like happy to be there because you're not traveling so much. Where have you been? What have you been doing?
Yeah, it's awesome.
In Berlin?
Well, I mean, since I left NICA, which is the National Institute of Circus Arts, which is the school in Melbourne, where most Australian acrobats come from if they haven't done fruit flies, but not all Australian acrobats, but most. I did that, and basically the day after I graduated, I joined Circa, and then for the next 11 or so years, I think until this point, I had not stayed in one spot for longer than 5 weeks in the last 11 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's been a big blur. It's been a pretty crazy ride. That's so yeah, mostly we toured through Europe, North America, South America, Australia, and a little bit of other places, but not too often.
How are you still sane? Are you? I think that's
debatable,
the craziest touring schedule I think I've ever heard. You haven't been in one place in the past 11 years? Did you say?
Yeah.
5 weeks?
Yeah, that was the longest season we did. Yeah, I don't know. I really enjoy the lifestyle. I really enjoy not having much stuff. And so traveling and having to fit everything in a suitcase by necessity means you don't accumulate much stuff. And so it's worked really well. I've never owned a car, that kind of stuff, like normal people things like that. I've kind of managed to skip by up to this point.
Do you ever wonder what it would be like to like own a car? I play this game with people sometimes where I'm like I've never worked in an office, and I'm always like, what would it be like to work in an office? Like, what is your office like? Does it have windows? You know, like I ask people these questions because I feel like people hear you're in the circus and they're like, oh my God, what is that like? But when you've done all of this, you're kind of like, what's it like to be a normal person?
Yeah, I definitely do that all the time. And I think, I mean, I'm kind of looking at trying to stop doing circus at this level in the next year. We've given our notice, me and my girlfriend, who we work together, we've given our notice that we're going to leave the company. But who knows? I mean, we say that we're going to try and get real people jobs and make a living and stop traveling. But I laugh because I know so many acrobats who've said they're going to do that, and then you see them on stage 5 years later still doing the same stuff. So
man, we'll
see how we go.
Yeah, for sure.
It's hard to leave. It's hard to leave because it's great.
Yeah, it's so much fun. And also it seems like for you, with the kind of work you've created, like you say, like the level of it isn't the most important or interesting part of your performing.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a physical challenge. And I feel like I've definitely, the two companies I've worked for, which are Circa and Gravity and Other Myths, for some reason, I've chosen companies where they make shows where you barely leave stage in the 80 or 90 minutes and you're kind of involved in doing everything. And so they're really intense physical shows, but they're a lot of fun as well. So the challenge is almost that endurance aspect, as well as just sometimes you shoehorn your 5-minute solo act in there as well.
Yeah, this feels to me like a very Australian thing. I don't know. I don't want to generalize the whole country, but like when I think about Australian circus, I think about this like balls to the wall, like everyone's on stage the whole time. Everyone's buff and swole and incredible. And you just go hard the whole time.
Yeah, I think there is a bit of that. And the culture in Australia is to be a bit more of a generalist. Like you might have a specialty act or two, but to get a job, you probably need to be able to stand on someone's shoulders. You know, the level is getting higher and higher. So you probably need to be able to fill at least one position in a 3-high and have some tumbling and be able to work with other people and have a solo. So it's pretty hard. You know, it's a steep learning curve.
Do you ever take these ideas of tumbling and adding all of that, or adding all of that stuff into it is what I just almost was what I did just say. But these ideas, concepts that you have, sorry, it's like 5 o'clock where I'm and like the sun is setting and I'm getting a little wacky. But do you ever take this and put it in, like, what do you do for like juggling or on straps? Do these concepts translate for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is actually one of the things that, I mean, hopefully makes my work stand out. I have the same concept, whether it's working on a solo piece, a duo piece, a juggling piece, a group acrobatic number or show. The thing I always look for is, you know, there's always a high skill level, something different. You've got to have a point of difference. I want to be working on something that I haven't seen before, I haven't done before. So there's always some element of personal growth. But also I tend to try and find things that fit well together and flow well together and complement each other. And it doesn't matter whether it's juggling or straps. I get the same when I make a sequence that works, it has the same feeling and it just kind of feels right. Yeah, it doesn't matter what discipline it is.
Do you ever have things that you've had to abandon over time? Have there ever been ideas or tricks or things that you've been like, you know what, actually, like, nah, not this?
Yeah, I'm sure there are. Nothing springs to mind immediately, but you can't have successes without failures, and you can't have, you know, good stuff without shit stuff. I think it's really important to try things that end up being shit, and to do things that are kind of embarrassing and to fail, because if you're scared of failing and looking like an idiot, then you're actually probably not going to make anything that's really interesting, and you're just holding yourself back from finding the cool stuff.
And how do you know, I guess this is like the reverse of like, what's the metric of something good? Like, what's the metric of something shit? No one claps?
Yeah. I mean, it either just doesn't look good or doesn't feel good, or you ask someone who you trust, and I'm lucky enough to generally have someone like that around nearly all the time, and they'll just, if I trust their opinion, and they'll either say flat out, it's not very good, or they'll kind of steer it in a better direction and say, oh, look, that's not good, but the element of it that I really like is this movement quality, or the way you didn't bend your legs in that particular tumble. Like, maybe explore that. That seems like a more interesting path to go down.
When you're touring, which is apparently all the time, and you're doing these full-on shows, how do you find the energy, time, and space to do these explorations?
I do it a lot less now. When I did it the most, I was, in my late teens, early 20s, when you tend to have a lot more energy and a lot more reserve for that kind of stuff. But also, I mean, the first company I worked for, Circa, they had it built into the way they work. So we had a 3-hour show call before a show. And ideally, the show wouldn't actually need that much. Yeah, no, the show calls are big. They're really chunky. But ideally, you're not going to be spending that entire 3 hours working on the show you're about to do. Hopefully, you're going to have about an hour and a half of stuff for that show. But then you'll also have an hour and a half of kind of just creating, playing, training. I mean, particularly because the way Circa makes shows, they're always making, like, their output of shows is just ridiculous. And the number of shows you have in your repertoire as a Circa performer is insane. It's like sometimes you need to have 7 or 8 shows that you can jump between. All the shows are constantly changing, or maybe you're working with different people, that kind of thing. So,
can you explain that to me a little bit better? Because I would understand this about Circa. It seems like all of their shows are very different, but also very similar.
Yeah, I mean, I can really only talk about it up until I left, which was about 3.5 years ago. Okay. So back then, that is one of my criticisms of Circa, and something that I really enjoy with Dom, is that when you perform with Circa, because you're learning so many different shows and you have to have so many different acts and so much repertoire in your brain, when you get to making a new show, often the show and the setting is new, but you don't really have time to develop and create new physical material. So I felt like I was often doing the same thing in a different costume. And I always wonder how much that is noticeable to an audience. Like, surely if you haven't seen a Circus show before, it's going to look amazing and it might blow your mind. But if you've seen 7 of them, surely you start to realize that, hey, that's the same trick I've seen in 4 other Circus shows. As an acrobat, I just found that it started to get, it's limiting and it's a bit and not as fun.
Do you ever get bored by the gravity and other myths, though? Like, it's set, right? Like, it's the same every night.
No, there is still degrees of improvisation.
Okay.
So some scenes more than others. Like, obviously, all the big skills are set in their place, but generally each show has at least some small degree of improvisation, whether it's, in this show we do some talking, so the talking will often be improvised, or I have a tumble solo, which I can change up each night. So there's all these little challenges, but also just because you're never off stage and because you never stop, you don't really have a chance to get bored because there's always something to be doing or thinking, or you've got to move to this, you've got to spot that, you've got to change costume, you've got to set this light, which I love that. I love it. Makes the show go so much faster.
Yeah, sure.
And it stops your body cooling down. Like, I don't like doing a thing and then stopping for 10 minutes and then having to jump straight back into something hard. Always feels not very good for my body.
So what's the thing you're fascinated about now? What's your thing in the moment?
It's kind of moving out from circus. I'm kind of I'm searching a bit for my next obsession. I've dabbled with guitar and I've dabbled with Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which I think once I stop touring, that's what I really want to explore more. Because in the last little bit when I haven't been doing circus, I kind of used jiu-jitsu as my cross training. And my same brother who I followed into breakdancing is also, he got me into jiu-jitsu. So, still following in his footsteps 15 years later, 20 years later. I think that could be really, really cool to get into more.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned guitar, because I was going to ask if these obsessions translate to non-physical things as well.
Mostly physical in some sense. Like I still yes, guitar isn't as strenuous on anything, but it's still a dexterous thing. And I really love that. I really loved when I first started learning guitar, I loved learning something from scratch because it had actually been quite a long time since I'd done that. And I was not really done any music before, at least not successfully. So it kind of felt like magic the first time you play a few chords and it actually sounds like a song. So yeah, it's still a physical challenge, which is nice.
Do you horizontally train guitar as well?
Strangely, no, actually. It's much more, maybe because my background isn't musical at all. I tend to learn very rote, this is what the tab says or this is what the teacher says. And I've done barely any exploration like I have with Tumbling or Circus. But actually, the reason I play guitar is very different to the reason I do Circus. To me, it feels very personal, and it's something I probably never will put on stage, and I won't really do it for other people. It's kind of a personal challenge and growth thing, and that feels really nice to have no pressure on it.
Yeah, sure. A personality type where the moment I figure something out or do something cool, I instantly want to share it. And so I'm always fascinated by people who can keep things to themselves.
But that's one of the things I like most about Circus is that anything can be Circus. So you find some new cool way to fold a shirt, then you can put that on stage if you want to.
Yeah, that's true. My final question. What advice would you give to yourself at the beginning of your career?
For me personally, I wouldn't really want to change anything because I really like where I'm at right now. So even though there was a bunch of hard stuff and a bunch of injuries and a bunch of shit things, I wouldn't want to really mess with that in case it changed where I've got to. But in a general sense as to what would I tell someone who's an aspiring circus artist, my main thing is the classic, look after your body because it's everything. If you don't have your health, you've got nothing. And it's only when you lose that do you realize how important it is.
Yeah, so, I guess that's a good one. I understand your butterfly effect kind of approach.
Yeah, every injury I've had has taught me something, They're very important lessons and they're hard-earned lessons. And so, you gotta make sure that you use them and you learn from them. Otherwise, what's the point?
Sure. I want to ask you what the worst injury you've ever had is, but I feel like that's very invasive. So you don't have to.
Oh, hey, that's totally fine.
What's the worst injury you've ever had?
I'm actually fairly lucky that I haven't had I haven't really had any catastrophic injury. I've dislocated a finger. I've tore my intercostals, my rib muscles. I've rolled one of my ankles about 7 times. But the worst injury I've had was kind of a mysterious one, which was a back injury. And this is when I left Circa and had 9 months off before joining GOM. And I got all the scans and saw all the experts and they said, great, good news. The scans say that your spine is completely healthy and we can't see anything wrong. And to me, it felt very muscular, but it just it got to the point where I could not even really tie my own shoes properly.
Wow.
And so that was easily the most hard one to get through.
Yeah, that's the worst that was when they don't know what's wrong. All I want to do is know what's wrong with me.
Yeah. That's it. But that's kind of the first and most serious time I really questioned, will I still be an acrobat? Is this the end of me performing? Do I have to find something else to do now? And really seriously ask those questions, which was really hard, but really useful.
Well, Lewie, thanks so much for taking the time to come on the show. It was great to talk to you.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Classic.
Killed it. Whole time, nailed it.
Awesome. Thanks, Shannon.
Yeah.
That was my interview with Lewie West. Talking to Lewie was so great. He's such a talented master of so many different disciplines within circus, but starting to understand how he approaches movement, now I understand how he could possibly start to master so many things. He talks about this approach of vertical versus lateral skill building. The vertical being that there's always the next big trick you're aiming to get. And he explains this in terms of going from a backward roll to a back salt. Salt is short for somersault or back flip or back tuck. Sometimes they're referred to. Anyway, so vertical training is that idea of like, we're always looking for the next badass skill. We're always trying to level up. We're always pushing. Whereas a horizontal approach is not about pushing so much as it is exploring and figuring out what you've learned from a specific skill as a byproduct. So what are all the transitions in and out of that skill? What are all the aspects of that skill that you've mastered? So really like honing in and studying this. And when you do that, you start to understand the skill. And as a byproduct, you understand a whole lot more about movement because you've trained in this way. Talking to Lewie, this flexibility, this idea of building horizontally is a skill in and of itself. And I'm not talking about this flexibility in terms of like body-wise, like the ability to stretch your body through a range of motion that's wider than the average bear. I mean that you have the flexibility to move in ways that aren't the strict traditional pathways of movement. Lewie talks about this in terms of people who can do these incredibly high level, really difficult technical tumbling passes. But then when they try to do a variation on a cartwheel, they can't because they've only practiced this one thing in order to get to the next thing. And I think that, I personally see this a lot when I go to teach workshops and I have students who want to learn the next hard trick. Usually it's aerial silks that I'm teaching and they want to do the next, crazy move that they saw on Instagram. And it's like, well, yes, that is an approach to training. And, circus does require a certain level of difficulty and danger. And that's what we're all amazed by. However, Lewie says this really interesting thing. He starts to talk about how you see your first double backflip and it's incredible. And then you see your 100th one and you're kind of like, oh, okay, that's that trick just done by another person. What really catches the eye, what really makes someone an artist and not just an athlete, is that ability to explore horizontally. I love how Lewie says at the very end, he said, anything can be circus. You can find a new cool way to fold a shirt and you can put it on stage. Because yes, we want to see things that are hard. Yes, we want to see the crazy triple. We want to see the double back. But we also want to see something new, something interesting, something innovative. And that can only come from people digging down deep, being patient, and being very creative. If you want to check out Lewie West in action, he is not on the World Wide Web. He, it sounds like, has been a little busy for the past 11 years to build a website, but he is on the gram. He is at north_by_Lew_West. So North by Lew West. For aerial training tips and inspiration, you can follow me on Instagram. I'm at _artist_athlete. My website is theartistathlete.com. I am on Facebook, The Artist Athlete, and that Patreon site that Adam and so many others are giving me so much love and support on is patreon.com/theartistathlete. Please, please, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. I always love reading the reviews, and subscribing helps you know when the next podcast is coming out. Usually it's weekly. And that's all from me. Talk at you next week, friends, fans, and enemies. The Artist Athlete podcast is supported solely by donations from people like you. Here's what some of those people have to say.
Aloha! My name is Beth Russell, and I live on the beautiful island of Maui, Hawaii. I am an aerial artist and movement instructor specializing in chakra yoga to keep me balanced and grounded. I play with silks, trapeze, lyra, rope, acro, aerial yoga, and dance, slacklining, pole, bungee, and climbing. Really anything that goes up and allows me to explore 3D space. You can find my dedicated aerial page on Instagram at Maui Aerialist. If you find yourself coming to Maui, let's play.
Hey there, friends, fans, and enemies. This is Chris Alston, Patreon of the Artist Athlete Podcast, straps artist and lyra performer and acrobat out of Greenville, South Carolina. So, if you're ever passing through, make sure to stop in and see me and my friends. We have a wonderful space, and we'd love to see you.
Hi, my name is Erica Lee. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm an aerialist. I teach performing arts to elementary school during the day and do pole and slings and rope by night. I really, really like the Artist Athlete podcast because it gives me a lot of circus goals to look forward to. It gives me a lot of insight on what's going on around the world in circus, and that's why I'm Patreon.
Hello, all. Thank you for tuning in to the Artist Athlete podcast. I am Opal Schwartz from Minneapolis, Minnesota. If you're ever in the cities, feel free to stop by the Aviary Minneapolis. It's a great time. With that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and goodbye.
Hey there, artists and athletes. This is Andy Smith, owner and artistic director at Saltaire Circus School in Jacksonville Beach, Florida. And I want to thank you for contributing to the Artist Athlete podcast. If you ever find yourself down in Florida, come check us out. Whether you're an artist, athlete, or someone ordinary just looking to be extraordinary, we got a place for you.